All right, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss,
Here?
Halliburton,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Ooh,
Nash,
Here.
Stead,
Here.
Willetts. 5 present, 1 absent.
All right, well, gosh, this is loud today. We've got one item before our executive session, and that is a training on the modern zoning code, which is why I see our modern zoning code team here today. Welcome, everybody.
Mayor, members of council, we will get into some detail here about implementation of the new zoning ordinance for the city. That's the purpose of this meeting. I'm Tim Keene, Director of Planning and Development Services for the city of Boise. I'm going to start the presentation and just give an update on implementation and deployment of the new ordinance. We're then going to be joined by Deanna Dupuy, who many of you remember from the rewrite process, to go over a reminder on the goals and framework for the new ordinance. Then we'll have Delaney Garlick will join us to talk about how the process is going. Delaney leads our development services team, so Delaney and her staff are day-to-day working on helping people navigate the process of the new ordinance. And finally, Jessica Zelag, who leads the entire planning team within PDS, will join us to close us out and talk about a few next steps. Just a reminder, most of you will remember this with great detail. This past year, in terms of implementation of this new ordinance, where we started in the beginning of 2023 when we were wrapping up a multi-year process to create these new rules for development of Boise. That picked up speed when we released the ordinance in February, and then we held a series of hearings in April with the Planning and Zoning Commission over multiple days, hearing many hours of testimony, and the Planning and Zoning Commission ultimately unanimously recommended approval, such that this new ordinance came to City Council in June of last year. Again, multiple days of hearings. Some of you remember those hours that we spent here. Quite a wonderful public event over multiple days, people talking about the future of the city and what they cared about and wanted to see of the future of Boise and how it should be represented in this ordinance. Council ultimately unanimously adopted the ordinance that we then began implementing on December 1st. So June was when council took action. Council set the December 1st effective date of the ordinance, and that time that council gave us between June and December 1st, the reason for that time was so that we could prepare to implement the new ordinance because we were changing all of our processes. So I'll speak some to that in just a minute. So on the left is kind of the beginning of the process back in the summer of last year. This is a scary image of government process on the left, a whiteboard, as we were talking through what are all the elements of this new code. And the good news is we went from that to a much simpler version of that. The point is that what you have is a group of staff that has taken ownership of trying to create a process that anyone can follow without being PhDs in city planning. And so on the right, I list the things that from the beginning, we said were our responsibilities to customers. So as we sat in that conference room and sketched out this whiteboard version of all the different elements of a process, that's an important part of this. You have to understand behind the scenes what are all the steps that have to go into helping someone through a process, but that's not the point of it. You don't want to confuse people. The point of it is on the right, which is, okay, but we've got to make this simple so that anyone can consistently navigate it. That was our commitment. In addition, we have to work with our systems, the systems that we use to help people through this process. We've got to make sure that they're in support of people both in person as they come to City Hall and seek to get an approval through this new zoning ordinance, or online. We've got to track our progress. As you remember, those that were here in June, We talked about, we're not going to get this perfect. We think the overall structure of the ordinance is as good as it can possibly be, but there will be technical details we'll have to keep working on. So we have to track our progress. And in the last bullet, we've got to be prepared to make adjustments as we experience this new ordinance. The last time the city implemented a new ordinance was 1966. So 60 years later, we have a whole new set of goals for the city, and those new rules are intended to have us be successful achieving those goals, but we can't assume we're going to be experts in growing in the opposite direction on day one. So we've got to be prepared to adjust based on our experience. So what all did that entail? So upon approval by council of this new ordinance in summer of last year, these were the things that we set out to do. We've got to, and this was the hardest part in a way, was to map the existing process. Because once you ask someone to map a process that's existed for decades, often the answer is, what process is that exactly? You know, okay, let's figure that out now. And so what a wonderful chance for us to say, hey, we're resetting here. Let's try to understand the way that this old ordinance was worked and then map it to a new process that we can make all those things simple, consistent, easy for the customer, all those kinds of things. So we had to map the process with the help of many city staff beyond the planning department. We had to rebuild our Acela system. I mentioned that our online systems work for the customer. So our IT department had to work alongside us, thinking through, okay, this is the way the process needs to work. How do we reconfigure the system to support that new process? Not a small undertaking. And CE worked alongside us on the website to rebuild the website such that it is also consistent with the new process and communicates a message as to what is this new ordinance and how do you follow these new processes. We created a development tracker. We actually had created it into last year when we were going through public hearings, but it was dramatically enhanced in association with the release of this new ordinance. And on December 1st, we had a 24-week training curriculum for staff. The picture on the right is among the last meetings that was held here in council chambers for a huge group of city staff, culminating that 24-week training period on the new ordinance and the new processes. And central to every step in that process and all of that training was around the customer experience and how do we get out of the gate on a good trajectory, recognizing, as I said, we're going to learn, we'll have to enhance it as we go, but let's recognize why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. With regard to the new planning website, we've actually got a project center that will be added to the website soon on the right here, which is nice because for that online customer, it will take you step by step through the process. So we're doing a lot of in-person things right now, but the website will soon be enhanced to add the project center and make that step-by-step process easier to navigate online. I mentioned the development tracker. This opened up the status of development in the city to any resident of the city in a dramatic way, because previously, before the development tracker, you had to understand how to navigate Acela in order to know what's going on, which is a tall order for anyone, you know, especially someone that's not used to navigating such things. And the development tracker, among the great things about it is that you can sign up to get email notices of permits in your area that have been applied for. So on the left here, you see you can sign up. I mean, you could sign up for all the areas, but if you just want your area of the city, you can sign up to get emails once a week, which notify you of requests that have been submitted to the city. So you get an email on Mondays that gives you those things that have been submitted in your area. We're approaching 300 people that have signed up for these regular Monday emails, and you don't have to sign up for the emails. You can go into the development tracker at any time and check on the status of what's happening in your area, but you can also sign up for the emails if you don't want to have to remember to do that, so that you're getting the notices at your home. That's why I say we're approaching 300 people that have signed up for that. We're also getting most people that are signing up for the emails are also looking at them every Monday. It's not, it's over 75% of those that have signed up are actually opening the email to say, okay, what's happening? So people that are signing up care about this and they're paying attention. With
Madam Mayor,
regard, yeah,
just quick comment. I just want to let you know, Tim, that I've probably sent about 10 people that way to sign up for the development tracker. It is so easy and convenient. I think for us as council members, when somebody has a question about an upcoming application, to send them that way. And it's been super, super helpful. It's been a big time suck for me personally because I go and I look at it and then I want to start looking through all the applications that are there because I'm a dork. And I'm interested to see what other things are going to be popping up in front of council, but it really has been a great tool. And the response I've gotten from people so far has been really, really positive.
thank you, council member. And, congratulations to community engagement and IT who have worked closely together to create something that isn't easy for people to navigate, to deliver on that commitment. With
Madam
regard
Mayor.
to the volume that we've seen since December 1st, yes, council member.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tim, I think you have now 301, because I just signed up. This is phenomenal. Thank you for doing this. Let me ask you a question. Talk to me about the different planning areas, because I think I counted that there's 10. And I'm maybe a little, why is there 10?
Well, those are the planning areas that the city established years ago when we decided, I think it was part of Blueprint Boise when the planning areas were established. So the boundaries of those planning areas, council member, go back to how the city had decided previously we would kind of divide the city for planning purposes. That's where those come from.
Okay, thank you.
This next slide gets into giving you a sense of how busy we are. I mean, and how things are going with regard to submittals based on this new ordinance. So this goes back quite a ways. You start on the far left with essentially the period from the close of the Great Recession to the pandemic, 2009 to 2019, and we were averaging about 75 submittals per month. And you can follow this through the pandemic years to 2022, before we really dug into this new ordinance and actually implemented the new ordinance at the end of 2023. But we were at 79 average per month in 2022. In 2023, prior to release of the new ordinance, we were at 64 submittals per month. And then since December 1st, so these are all new zoning ordinance submittals, we've got 315, which breaks down to 155 per month. The point is, all of us were wondering how will this go in terms of volume and people's response to it and interest in submitting based upon it. And so far, the evidence is people are really interested. Certainly hasn't dissuaded anyone from submitting. Our volume is up significantly. And so signs are good. But to dig down a little deeper into that topic, what about the things that we included that were new aspects of this? How's that going? Are we getting any response to those? The previous one got into how many planning projects we're getting. But some key takeaways, we're going to start with ADUs. So on the bottom, for the year prior to implementing the new ordinance, so that would be December of 2022 through November of 2023, we had a total of 40 submittals for new ADUs. And you can see that since December 1st, we now have 69 that have been submitted. So the number of submittals for ADUs is up dramatically since the new ordinance has been implemented, which, as you all know well, is exactly what we were hoping for, is that we would have more submittals for these, such that if we continued that for the year, we'd be at over 300 for the first year of the new ordinance, if we kept up that pace. And I will say that since we released the new ordinance, that pace has been very consistent.
Sure, I just had a question because this language is different, the 40 applications versus 69 in pipeline. Does that mean that since December 21st, we've had 29 new applications or 69 total since December 1st?
We've had 69 new applications since December 1st.
Okay,
So my point is that we had 40 in the 12 months before December
Right.
1st.
Great.
We've had 69 since December 1st.
Great. That's great news. Thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, quick follow-up. Tim, of the 40 applications the year before, were those approved applications? Actual permits?
Not all of them went to permits, some
Okay.
of them, and this is the case always with permits, you'll get some planning approvals that are done. And then in that time, since the planning approval, it wouldn't have gone to building permit yet. And that has to do often with the individual circumstances, like they still have to get financing or, they ended up moving, you never know. So it wasn't all of the 40 that got built, but it's most of them did. Mhm. Also, we have had 3 neighborhood cafes that have been submitted to us. And you'll remember in the new ordinance, we permitted by right on corner lots in R1 districts, the ability to do a cafe or a shop up to 2,000 square feet. We've had 3 of those submitted, including the one on the right. The one on the right, which is at 13th Street in a corner lot there in the north end, also is an example of taking advantage of the incentives. We've got 3 submittals based on the incentives. I'm sorry, 4 submittals based on the incentives. 3 of them are using the affordability incentives, and 1 of them is using the sustainability incentive. And the one that's using the sustainability incentive is this one on 13th Street in the north end on the corner, which includes 4 units in the neighborhood cafe.
Where are the other 2 neighborhood cafes?
I'll have to check on that, Mayor. God, I don't want to say the wrong places. The other thing I'll say about the planning projects that we're getting and the conversations that are being had is we're getting a lot of interest in the incentives and people working through how can I utilize them on my different lots, and that includes all the incentives. That includes up to the 4 units on a lot. That includes the strategic infill, so-called, which gets you up to 12 if you're on a collector. All those incentives we include in there. There's just a lot of interest in those, and finding ways to utilize them. We included the CWI application because the College of Western Idaho's redevelopment of the property at Main and Whitewater is a really important mixed use. It's got some complexity to it because it's 11, I think, acres, and it includes multiple buildings, structured parking. Of course, there's the college aspect of it, but there's housing and other things. And so it's really the first example of a more complex, larger project that has worked through our new system that includes concept review and then on through interdepartmental review. You remember the discussion we had about IDR interdepartmental review prior. We ended up hiring someone, Kevin, to lead interdepartmental review, who's on Delaney's team. So they've had that meeting, and it's been great to work through that full process with a bigger, more complex project and work out some kinks there. Although that one has gone extraordinarily well, and the developer team that's working on it is really pleased with how it's gone. But you'll remember I mentioned it because we were talking about the interdepartmental review being a way to actually help these projects so you don't have to go from department to department or agency to agency. You have one meeting, you bring everybody together to review those projects, these bigger ones that have lots of issues associated with them, so we can make the process more consistent and predictable for people that are submitting. And that's certainly been the case with this first one. So that is the conclusion of kind of how it's gone with rollout and initial deployment and what kind of response that we're seeing. We're going to transition now to Deanna Dupuy, I'm sorry, who's going to come up and take us back through the basic structure of this, and then we'll move on to Delaney and Jessica. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Tim, and hi, Mayor and council members. As Tim said, I had the privilege to be on the team that helped to translate resident aspirations and city goals into a zoning framework. We organized the code to support established citywide goals, focusing on addressing big questions as it relates to the future of our city and how we move forward given current community needs. We incorporated elements into the code so that it enables the development of a variety of housing, ensures that as we grow, we are doing so in a manner that is efficient with our resource use, creates mobility options, and fundamentally supports the development pattern that is affordable to city residents in the long term. With these goals in mind, we established a zoning framework that is directly tied to our physical city. The first component of this is to establish zones that direct the most intense development into areas of our city with the infrastructure to support that development. As shown on the screen, we've developed 5 mixed-use zones that scale in intensity given their area of the city. Downtown, or what we call MX5, serves a very important role in the zoning framework. We have expanded the downtown footprint to match the planning and investment that has occurred within the area. We expect that with the modern zoning code, we will see unique development projects that make great use of valuable downtown real estate and prioritize people and new businesses over parking. Next in the hierarchy, we focused our development along our best-in-class transit routes, with mixed-use transit-oriented development, or MX4, supporting the creation of transit nodes at the commercial intersections of Whitewater Park, Collister, Glenwood, and Horseshoe Bend. Here we allow up to 70 feet in height, require pedestrian-oriented streetscapes, and offer incentives for affordable or sustainable housing. Along similar lines, we have MX3, or mixed-use active. These are the commercial properties along the rest of State Street, Vista, and Fairview, as well as the activity centers identified in the city's comprehensive plan blueprint Boise. Here we also allow up to 70 feet in height and hope to create districts that support our transit investments and create true activity centers where people can access goods and services, either by walking, biking, or driving for much shorter distances. In addition, we have converted properties adjacent to our transit corridors to R2, which is our compact residential district. We feel that this is a very important aspect of the framework because it creates the opportunity for more people to live within a 3-minute walk of our transit corridors. Next, we wanted to support the development of special places close to where people live. Mixed-use neighborhood, or MX1, allows those special places all across our city. Here we hope to see 2 to 3-story buildings supporting businesses neighbors can frequent. Along the same line, as Tim noted, we've already had people express interest in, we've allowed for the development of small-scale neighborhood cafe and retail within our residential zones. These are meant to occupy a small footprint, but serve as a gathering spot for the community, much like Roosevelt Market does today. As we've said many times throughout the adoption process, the zoning code doesn't meet our goals in just one way. Another key aspect of the framework was to ensure that as we allow for more housing in our neighborhoods, we have a strategy to ensure that it contributes to citywide goals of affordability and sustainability. We offer 6 different incentives, 3 of which offer developers additional neighborhood scale density if they can meet certain sustainability or affordability requirements. With our goals in mind, we translated that framework into individual zoning designations for every parcel within the city. Before adoption, this was our conversion map, and now it's accessible as the official zoning map on the city website. Now I can transition to Delaney, who will speak to what her and her team do best, which is apply these rules across the city to individual projects.
Right. Thank you, Tim, Deanna, rest of the team, Madam Mayor, members of the council. With the adoption of the modern zoning code, we have a new approval process for development applications. This is bucketed into 4 different types. We have type 1 for a more simple review. Type 2 is for our administrative approvals. Type 3s and 4s are for our hearing level applications. Just to provide some context, examples of that, you will see in something simple like a type 1, you would find a home occupation or temporary use permit. In a type 2, you're going to find your ADUs or record of surveys. For type 3, it's going to include hearing level items. Things such as a variance would be heard at our hearing examiner, which is a new position we brought back that we had in the past. They will be responsible for variances and admin appeals. Also in type 3, you're going to find things like a conditional use permit at our Planning and Zoning Commission. You will find a design review major going to our Design Review Commission, and then major certificate of appropriateness would be heard by our Historic Preservation Commission. Things that didn't change too much is our type 4s. Those are items that are decided by City Council. That includes things such as annexation, rezone, subdivisions. One thing to note is City Council will hear appeals of the type 3 applications, excluding the hearing examiner, which would go to district court on appeal. So those are just a separate process. So to dig a little bit into the process, this graphic outlines our process. A big takeaway here is that you're going to see those simple type 1 and type 2A applications are going to follow that top line and do sort of an off ramp at the very top to a submittal. So they start at early assistance, concept review, and then they're off to a submittal for admin approval. From there, we also have sort of a discretion on a type 2B. That's going to be our more complicated, still admin approval, but at that level, we would want to see an interdepartmental review, so get some eyes on the project. So for those applications, they're going to go through the process, but make a stop at IDR prior to going to an application submittal. All other items, the type 3 and type 4s, will follow this process. From concept review, they go to a neighborhood review. This is a step required for them to meet with the neighborhood early on in the design review process so that neighbors have a meaningful input. From there, they're going to request interdepartmental review. At this point, we're verifying that they had their neighborhood review. We take a look at the feedback and summary report that the applicant provides. Following a successful IDR, they're off to an application submittal and then to their appropriate hearing bodies, depending on the application. So to break this down a little bit more, all of our projects start at early assistance. This is a step led by the development services team. This allows us to track information early on, provide better customer service, and to facilitate higher quality projects. This step typically starts with the applicant starting a PLN case online. From there, a concept review is initiated by the development services staff. This can be an iterative process where we review a concept plan, a project vision, and make a determination on the benefits and any concerns with the proposal. Then we figure out what type and what process the application needs to go through. For those hearing level items, as I mentioned, the type 3s and type 4s, they would move forward with that neighborhood review step. This is a step between the applicant and neighbors. It's an important step in the process that allows the feedback from the neighborhood early on in the application process. It ensures transparency, it encourages open communication, and it provides neighbors with the chance to review a project early on. After completing that neighborhood review, the next step is interdepartmental review, or IDR. This review meeting gets scheduled. We invite both internal and external staff and different departments and agencies. This is an opportunity for folks to come together, review a project, provide feedback to the applicant prior to them making a submittal. This is a very valuable step in that we get to give and get feedback early on while still in the design phase, and it's a chance for departments and agencies to collaborate across the board. And then just to sort of break down our kind of notifications, this was revamped with the new adoption of the code. For type 1 applications, those are not subject to noticing. So if we move into the type 2s through type 4, those applications get posted on our community development tracker. They get transmitted to the neighborhood associations and agencies. So at submittal, we are transmitting to those groups. For type 2 applications, they will have mailed notices to adjacent properties upon approval. For those hearing level applications, they will have mailed notices of the public hearing when those get scheduled. Variances will be sent to adjacent property owners, while all others will be sent to the appropriate buffer. So appointed bodies are 300 feet, while city council would be 500 feet. And then just a caveat that subdivisions are dictated on the acreage and number of units. So with that, I'll send it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Delaney. Madam Mayor, members of the council, it's a privilege to be in front of you tonight, and also an honor to manage the group that works on development applications, customer intake, any of our long-range planning, work related to city design, and our mobility and public spaces group. So Delaney is one of the 3 managers and her team that manages that plan review process. Also Crystal Rain and Josh Wilson, you'll see often before you as projects come their way to council. And Deanna and her team with city design, Tessa Grieger, mobility, public spaces, pathways update, I believe you're going to have next week. So I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps and leave time for questions with all of you. But the transition to the new code began on December 1st. So the code went into effect, and that meant that any applications received prior to December 1st, so up until 5 p.m. on November 30th, were projects that are under what we're calling the legacy code. We had 107 applications that by November 30th were still in the queue and are still being processed. And as we work on new projects coming in, so the about 315 that we have to date, there's going to be a hybrid transition as older projects move through their process, and then you'll start to see new projects show up here before you. Through February, it'll still remain legacy codes at the code projects at Commission and City Council. And by March, we're going to start to see some of those newer projects come forward. So as I mentioned, ideally, we'll get to a point where we'll bucket the version of the applications that are before you in a night to keep just straight with everyone what's old code and what's new code. Of those 107 that are coming through, we'll be very clear to identify for council which code it's under and what are the findings that are of consideration and through your deliberation to be considering. Your role as council members and as mayor remain the same regardless of what code the project is under. So staff will come before you with their report stating the various elements of what the project is along with their recommendation and signal for you which findings are under consideration and what the question before the council is. The difference between that deliberation and kind of the Robert's Rules of Order and the procedures is right now mostly around testimony time. So under the old code, neighborhood associations were given as much time as the applicant or at the discretion of the chair. Under the new code, neighborhood associations have a minimum of 10 minutes. For others that are testifying on the project, it stays same regardless of the code, is 3 minutes and 3 minutes. So our next steps, and this was at the direction of councilman when we were here in June, was to go into effect on December 1st, which we worked diligently to do and prepared for that and has happened, and we're about 9 weeks in. But also direction to return to council within a year, so no more than 12 months, or no less than 12 months, excuse me, to discuss the effectiveness and to make appropriate amendments. So the theme really to this year and as we are implementing on the new code, I think is to be very data driven in the decisions that we're making and in our tracking and monitoring of the success of the code, not just the volume and how fast or complexities that might lead to when projects get approved or through the approval process, but also are they really achieving the goals that we've set out there that Deanna reviewed? Are people taking advantage of the incentives? Are we seeing creativity? Are we getting the density in the corridors that we've desired to see that density? Tree mitigation, climate action goals, like all of that is a part of our monitoring and data gathering of coming back to you and reporting then quarterly how that's going along with volume and approval time periods on each project. We'll continue to outreach with the community on how it's going. And as we find things and learn with the code, be in conversation with you and with, others in the department too, of how we can work better and how we can continue to improve the code, improve the process, but always with a customer mindset first and foremost. So with that, questions, comments, and might ask for some help sometimes depending on the complexity of it.
Madam Mayor. Well, first, Jessica, Deanna, Delaney, Tim, I guess you as well. Thank you for all the hard work in getting it to this point. I'm so excited to see that it's off and running really, really well. And I think that that's just a testament to, all the I's that have been dotted, the T's that have been crossed every step of the way, and how careful you've all been in the process. I do have a couple of questions. One, I'm kind of curious if somebody comes into that early assistance process, the sunny day scenario is that they've got a good project, it works really well with staff, and it kind of moves through the order really, really well. And I'm also kind of curious as if there's a not sunny day process where they come to get that early assistance, they present a project and you say, this isn't actually exactly what we want to see. And they say, well, this is exactly what I want to do. Do they have a process of continuing to try to move that forward? And can you kind of tell us what that might be a little bit?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, council members, that's a great question. So with each of the steps in the process, we've drilled down to exactly what is the bare minimum that's required. What is the purpose of that step in the process? What is the deliverable as an outcome of that step in the process? And none of it leads to that the answer is no, or we can't work with you. I mean, every conversation starts with, let's figure out how we can figure out what your goals are and how we can find a way to move this forward. So at early assistance, what we're really looking for at a bare minimum is a person with an address and an idea. To move further along in that's when you start to engage with maybe a developer or an architect and get to that site plan. It's a little bit more expressed as far as dimensionally what you're trying to achieve and some access, some loading considerations. But what comes out of concept review is a summary report where staff will provide feedback on what considerations need to be kept in mind. If there is an environmental review required, what that would look like when we're going to bring in Public Works to talk about sewer connection or something else that might involve them, ACHD for roadway connections. All of that package of the full process is just continually informing the applicant what we'll be looking at and what there might be questions about. And if someone, they have a different view and wants to go a different direction, we'll never stop someone from submitting an application for consideration. But that's actually when there might be a point where we can, as staff, approve that. Code has its limitations, and so we'll have our decision on that. And the applicant can pursue either appealing that and going to the hearing examiner, or if it goes to the different hearing bodies, if it's design review or historic planning or planning and zoning, ultimately that would be an appeal before council. So there's always paths. But what we're hoping to do is really inform the applicant early on what some of the major challenges are going to be and thoughts and considerations that they need to come back and answer as a part of their official submission for their application.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And I guess you could help them navigate the variance process as well if that ends up being the route they want to take. And then my second question, last one, and you may not know the answer. One of the last things that we approved with the zoning code rewrite was a condition where if somebody wanted to submit a conditional use permit for parking to reduce even more parking, do you know if you've seen any applications where anything's come forward, looking for something like that yet?
No, not yet.
All right. Well, thank you. And great job again, everyone, throughout the whole process. I'm excited to see how we keep moving forward, keep smoothing it out along the way. And I know you'll do a good job with it.
Madam Mayor, this is really terrific news. As I look at the numbers, especially for the ADUs, I'm actually really surprised how high they are. And I think this is really going to stand up some great housing, a different type of option here in Boise we don't see so often. So great job. And I think that's in large part to all the iterative work that the team has done and reaching out to public and getting more and more information. So great job. One question I have is in regards to the neighborhood review. I know a lot of times neighbors have a lot of input and at the heat of the moment in there, they may not be thinking as rationally as they should be beforehand. Is there a way that neighbors in that meeting that they could go online to add comment either before or after one, if they weren't able to attend the meeting due to a timing, and for us as a city to track that information as well?
Madam Mayor, council
Thank you.
members, great question as well. So the neighborhood meeting process has changed in the new code in a way that I think we have a lot more ways to see who is participating in those meetings, what the feedback is, and then what the developers' adjustments might be based on that feedback. So previously, the meetings were required to happen with a 10-day notice period, and then you were required to wait a 14-day period before you could submit. And that was it. What happened in the meeting, what was presented, what the conversation looked like, none of that was documented. Really, the only requirement that we had to look back to is, did it meet the noticing requirements and the time period for when you could submit your application? So now in the new process, what that looks like is upon getting your concept review summary report, still the 10-day notification is required to let people know that your neighborhood meeting's happening. But at the conclusion of that neighborhood meeting, and before you can move on to interdepartmental review, the developer is going to be required to not only provide to us what material was presented at the meeting, a summary of that meeting, and a list of all of the people that attended and participated. Our requirement in the modern zoning code is that those meetings are required to be hosted in person at a publicly accessible location, climate controlled. It has to be a public place, and also a hybrid option to recognize that the people need two ways to get there. And then another requirement is that the developer must provide contact information. And that happens very early on, right after the concept review summary report. And when it shows up on the development tracker, that there will be either a project website, if the developer chooses that. It could be reference to the company itself and contact information about who to contact at the company, or an email address of the applicant. And so all of that is a way for the community to have their questions go to the team working on the project. The point at which that those comments become a part of public record is actually after the application is submitted. So neighborhood review happens, interdepartmental review happens. I should mention in interdepartmental review as well, the applicant is going to be required to produce all of that material and then speak to it in IDR of, as a consideration, what happened in that neighborhood meeting? Did you change anything based on the feedback that you received from the community? Like what has changed in any way? So it's definitely a really relevant now part of the process that staff can seek changes, be aware of needs or considerations that have to be addressed, and then include that in their staff report as well of what happened between the different stages of the process and the neighborhood meeting itself. And then once the application is submitted and is preparing it to go to hearing, if that's what's required, then that kind of follows the typical parties, like who's a party of record and who can testify and that kind of stuff.
Those are all really great changes to add to that neighborhood meeting. It's going to be real resourceful. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. For another time, love the numbers. So thank you for bringing the numbers like 69 ADUs. A week and a half ago, we were all abuzz about 55 and now it's 69. So just ways that we can continue to see those numbers. I don't know if that's a public dashboard or not. Very curious about the usage of our density bonuses for affordability and sustainability. I know that's a topic that we really want to be able to review in November and see how that's working, and so any ways that we can get those kind of updates would be great. And just thank you for all the work that you're putting in. I will note, the development tracker, hearing that stat that, there's only apparently 200 people opening it every week. And that's one of them is me, makes me feel like even more of a dork. But, I've seen a couple ADUs go up in my planning area. Both were owner occupied projects and just really excited to be able to see that happening. So thank you for all the work you've put into that.
And Mayor, Jessica, thanks for your team's work. One of the purposes of the zoning code was to reduce red tape and to get housing on the market as soon as possible. Walk us through what it takes time-wise, and I know that every project is its own individual special snowflake, but walk us through how much that time takes from beginning to end, particularly with all these other agencies that we're trying to work with to make sure that something's what we want it to be in the city of Boise.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, and other council members, it's evolving because we're into week 9. So we have daily numbers of average applications and weekly, monthly, also how long it's taking to go from early assistance to concept review to those neighborhood meetings that have their notification requirements to get to IDR. So to kind of start back on December 1st, we knew based on if you submitted an application that very, very first day, and it was something that had a neighborhood meeting requirement and going on to council, that likely you were looking at a neighborhood meeting probably December 17th to December 25th. So some chose to do that. Others, the holidays kind of fell in the middle of that. The very first opportunity to get to an interdepartmental review then was that second week in January, and that's where we saw the CWI campus project. They were one of the very first applications that we received. So that took a month, but with the holidays in the middle of it. And then, as mentioned in March, it'll be I think the first Monday of March, those will be the first projects coming to planning and zoning. So as early as you could get in December 1st to the beginning of March with those 107 other applications still in the queue, moving through their process. All of the state code really dictates what the notification transmittal requirements are around those projects, and time for staff to really kind of manage that volume. Our first week, we had 57 applications. That kept up the second week with 45 applications. And then because of the holidays, we did have a little bit of a break there, a little bit of a relief. But on average, we're seeing about 25 to 30 a week. And are looking at things like how long does it take on average based on your complexity. So a type 1 will be very fast. Type 2s, it's probably like a 9 business day turnaround. And then those type 3s, type 4s, the complexity. We also have a view too on time with staff, first time when the project's back out with the applicant for more information. So really just drilling down on our process and understanding how we're resourcing the division. Do we have any capacity issues? Is something getting hung up because of something that's about our process, or is it something about code, or is it the market, or what is it, if we can put a finger on it? But and the volume that Delaney and her team have been kind of combating every day to get them moving through as fast as possible is really commendable, and a testament to their dedication as public employees and to Boise. So we'll continue to improve on those timelines and report out. Absolutely.
Well, I think that it looks like that nobody has any more additional comments or questions. So I just want to say that I'm really proud of the work that all of you and those of you not in here have done as well, And it's great to see, reflecting back on that slide where you showed the number of applications, not just ADUs, but all the applications submitted since December 1st. It's great to see. And of course, it's now been it's been December, 2 months. So we will be learning so much with these applications that we have received. Really look forward to hearing from you all what you are learning, where we can make improvements. Appreciate the focus on customer service, both for our residents as well as our builders, who are also often residents, but for everybody involved. And excited to see that already this is making a difference with the types of applications that we're receiving, because it means homes for Boiseans in our community. So the work that you all did is deeply appreciated, not only by this council and myself, but I know the community at large and those that are looking for options, homes of all shapes and sizes close to work, and where they want to live and recreate. So thank you all very much for this work.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we've got an executive session.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
pursuant to Idaho Code Section 742061C, I move to enter into executive session in order to consider the acquisition of real property not owned by a public agency.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, we call the roll?
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We'll be back at 6.